come back. She said, they are just not ready for you folks. I said, well, that's okay. And I said, well, how did you like it? She was leaving. How did you like it? She said, I absolutely loved everything you did tonight. She goes, this is my second time seeing you guys. I just love you guys.
That's great.
I was like, yeah.
Welcome listening to radio station where the mighty host of heaven sing. Turn your radio on. Turn your radio on. Turn your radio on. If you want to feel those good vibrations coming from the joy that love can bring, turn your radio on. Turn the radio on. Turn your radio on. Turn your radio on. Oh, yes, turn your radio on. Listen to the music. Turn your radio on. Oh, yes, turn your radio on. Glory share. Turn your lights down low. Oh, yes, turn your lights down low. And listen to the Master's radio. In touch with God. Turn your radio on. Turn your radio on.
Just like rock and roll, it's hard to say where gospel music actually began. But the combination of old black spirituals in the 1800s, mixing with the heart of the gospel message, hope and a bright future, became the springboard. In the 1900s, the staple singers, Mahalia Jackson, C.F. Franklin, and many newcomers helped pave the way into the 1950s and 60s. In 1968, Larry Norman pioneered Jesus music, while others followed like Randy Stonehill and Barry McGuire. This led to an explosion of Jesus music, even on the top 40 radio airwaves. Today, it's a bona fide growing segment of the record industry.
Rock music has, in its most contemporary form, beginning with Chuck Berry, Elvis, and the Beatles back in the 60s and 70s, late 50s and early 60s, it's just guilty by association. It was rock and roll meant sex and drugs and rock and roll, and there was little else in the very beginning. And so, but the sad thing is that you take the roots of rock music and it just goes back and back and back through country music and jazz music through the early 1900s, back into the black spirituals of the 1800s.
Well, I think that music is a tremendous influence on people's lives. It has always been proven both in the Christian realm, going back into the Bible, where even when the king was ill and what have you, or troubled, you know, he brought in the musicians. I think music has a tremendous effect. It can have a good effect and it can have a bad effect.
That there was never a golden age of church music because there was never a golden age of theology. And I guess that would be how I would reflect on how someone might feel. We have people now who think some of the music is just terrible and, you know, we should go back to the chant. Mm-hmm. But in fact, the chant was not the earliest church music, and in fact, that was not a golden age of theology either. It was just a reflection of the time.
I just think that church people should be more open-minded, you know. I can relate to what you just said because we were one of the first groups before Andre Crouch, before the Clark Sisters, before the Winers. We were one of the first groups to do contemporary gospel with the Times and Mighty Highs and all of that. And they said that we were ahead of our time. Now, people request those songs that they used to look down on, said they was too up-tempo, too commercial.
If you sat in a cave for 10 years and you came back, you'd go, what are they doing, you know? But I think that they did the same thing that we do. Fanny Crosby reached people, and people criticized her. People criticized Ira Sankey, who wrote a song called The 90 and 9, you know, and today it's the oldest sounding thing, but it was controversial and caused a lot of the songs that we sing are just standard bar tunes. The Wesleys were famous for taking pop songs of the day and putting Christian words to them, and we still sing a lot of them. I think they'd agree with the means. They did the same thing, but I'd have to say I think they'd be shocked if they just were transported to right now today.
The controversy around Christian music has obviously been there from the start. I think it's fresher now because more people are speaking out on it. I can remember the days, Tom, being on the road and having groups burn albums before our concerts in the early 70s. Literally bring trash cans in and have a couple hundred people come and burn the album of the artist that we would have there that evening. So controversy is not new to Christian music. I think it's just more highlighted now.
One of the major areas of making the message contemporary is the same way that it was made contemporary 2,000 years ago. And that is, it was done in terms of the culture, what's happened to people's interrelationships with each other, and put it into a perspective that each one feels down deep in their heart that they would love to have, and that would give greater meaning and purpose and joy and excitement to their life.
And then we heard the Lord tell us that He wanted us to go out and minister. And of course, our first reaction was, this time, God made a mistake. Said, Lord, we're cowards. You know, we're cowards. We're asking us people who are afraid of people. We're afraid of people. Stand up in front of people and sing? Well, for the first 3 years, I remember we would just sing. And all the songs were real fast. And then we started to talk. And we haven't stopped since.
There are people that are pastors today that were saved at contemporary Christian concerts. And you can't argue with that. But still, there's this cycle I've seen. I was talking about it last night in Rochester, that about every 4 years, people say, yeah, it's okay, it's fine, and then the whole thing changes and they start saying, no, it's not okay, and everybody gets all ruffled again. And then they say, oh, it's okay, and then, you know, and I've seen that go through like 2 times already, 2 cycles. And I wish that some of the men that have the public ear, that are evangelists out there, would really stick to preaching the gospel and not knocking other ministries.
I've been to their concerts, I've seen their altar calls, what they call altar calls, and for the most part, I maintain that nobody's getting saved. What I told one, and I won't call the name because I don't want to embarrass or cause an unfair reflection on anybody, but it's an individual that I love, and he's in the forefront of that particular music. I feel he's wrong, and I told him, I said, he was talking about that very thing, oh, we're seeing thousands saved. And I just said, no, you're not. I was just in one of your concerts. And I said, you know, the kids there, they were there for one reason. They were there to rock. They could care less. When you stopped to talk, they were fidgety. All they wanted the music to rock.
It's got everything to do with youth and the gospel. I think it is bringing more youth into, getting them more interested in religion than anything else has in the past. It's bringing the word in a new way that's exciting and that says it in a way that nothing else can.
I got saved in Syracuse, New York. I accepted the Lord as my Savior, and my life changed. I've spent a lot of time on the road with a lot of bands. I've toured with many bands that you guys probably have records of at home. I've got gold records hanging up on the wall. I've been around the world. I've been in some of the biggest recording studios, and I've hung out with some of the very famous people. But I want to tell you something. There's only one thing that means anything in this world, and that's a relationship with Jesus Christ. I don't care what you're doing. I don't care how much money you have, how much fame you have, how happy you think you are. If you don't know Jesus, you can dump everything else in the toilet.
98% of the kids today going to any city, Syracuse, Buffalo, New York City, Timbuktu, 98% of the teenagers in Syracuse, New York are outside the reach of a Bible-believing, Bible-preaching church.
Wherever we go, the church is always involved in our concerts. If we're not in a church, we are being sponsored by a church, or if we're not being sponsored by a church, there is a church pastor there with counselors from a local body so that when people get saved and make commitments to God, they can get plugged right into a local church.
Of the Lord, and you may have thought you'd come here for me tonight, but you didn't. We have come here for you. We've come here to minister to you. If you come in here and your faith is way down here before you leave here tonight, it's going to get lifted. If you come in discouraged, you're going to leave encouraged. Amen? Let me hear somebody say this thing. Come on, on, this thing is real.
Tonight's concert could have been held in a big church where the people could have brought their friends to that with a big stage. It really could have. But the church has said, no, 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 no. We don't want anybody to complain. I think that's a crime. Well, if the church doesn't do it, young people are still going to, there are excited young people. We're going to celebrate. Last night we were at a fair. The night before we were in a theater that has rock concerts all the time. We have an answer, and the more young people meet Jesus, you better believe they're not going to worship him in styles. If you meet Jesus, are you going to go back and worship him in a 1930 music? That makes no sense.
But on the ministry end of things, we have like follow-up Bible studies that are involved, and they're just a lot more involved. We're in the city, in a sense, 6 weeks after with a follow-up Bible study. So there's a lot involved in our evenings that people who maybe just come and have bought that dollar ticket and come to our evenings will realize that the 6 months, the year, the 8 months, whatever before has gone into it, and then the things that have gone afterwards.
This comes to my mind in San Diego. We flew down there for a gig and sang, and weirdness, it was just a weird day to start with. Nobody was there at the airport to pick us up, and we played this funky, it was great, and it just seemed like, God, why are we here? Yeah. But at the end of the concert, this guy came up out of nowhere, bawling, saying that he was touched and wanted us to pray with him. And that's it. That's basically what they said, but
concert sometimes as much as a year in advance, okay, and we work towards getting 2,000 people or whatever it is. Like for Mike Warnke, we had nearly 3,000 people and a whole bunch of people turned away. We'd been planning that for months and months for that 2-hour period, okay, but see, then afterwards there are things that have to happen, follow up. We've dealt with several area churches and encouraged follow-up. We follow up ourselves. We have our own little program. And the counselors that we have at the concerts, we encourage them to stay with the people, not just... what we're not interested in is we're not interested in having people come and be entertained, okay, and then leave. Man, if it ain't ministry, it needs not to happen. It's just as black and white as that.
Christian music is really exploding, and especially in the last year and a half. All of a sudden, it seems that through the last few years, Christian music hits some pinnacle, and then we say, oh, we can't go any further. And then somebody always, 6 months later, goes boom and does it. Amy Grant, a year and a half ago, brought a song on Top 40 radio called Find a Way from the Unguarded album that had really never been done before in as pure a sense as that.